have a question on Iran-China relations.
Okay.
What's your reaction to Iranian foreign minister visit to China? Also, Beijing instructed its firms to ignore U.S. sanctions. Could you also address that?
Well, I'll direct you to Treasury on that front. There are options that we have. If you ignore our sanctions, you're going to face secondary sanctions. And I don't have an announcement for you on that today, but we don't do these things, for symbolic purposes. On the first point about the visit, it's fine. I hope the Chinese tell him what he needs to be told, and that is that what you are doing in the Straits is causing you to be globally isolated. You're the bad guy in this. You guys should not be blowing up ships. You should not be putting mines. You should not be trying to hold hostage the global economy. I hope the Chinese bring, whether it's done privately, but I hope it's done directly, that's the message they deliver to them. As I outlined earlier today, China is an export-driven economy. Okay, I'm not here to speak on behalf of what's in the best interest of China, but it's obvious. China is an export-driven economy.
Okay, so little Marco Rubio is talking shit again. He's talking to China like they're a small factory town in 1995. It's obvious, he says. Nothing is obvious to a man who refuses to look at a balance sheet. Let's debunk this 30-year-old myth right now. China is not a fragile export-driven economy anymore. That is a fantasy Washington tells itself to feel powerful. According to World Bank data, China's trade-to-GDP ratio plummeted from 64% in 2006 down to 37% by 2023. Even more devastating for Rubio's argument, net exports of goods and services actually contribute less than 3% to China's total GDP. But here's the real kicker. According to CEIC data, net exports contributed 1.635% to China's total GDP growth for the full year of 2025. And by Q1 2026 year to date, that's just 0.765%. Meanwhile, final consumption is driving 46.7% of growth, and gross capital formation contributes about 1.9%. That means that domestic consumption is driving the vast majority of China's growth, not exports. Let me repeat that. 1.635% for the entire 2025 year. 0.765% in just the first quarter of 2026. Rubio is literally basing his entire strategy on a factor that is less than 3%. China's economy is becoming more independent of exports, not less. China is a domestic consumption and infrastructure beast. They have a massive internal market. Yes, they are an industrial powerhouse, but they do not depend on the West the way Rubio thinks they do. This is the danger of having politicians who get their economic data from think tank talking points instead of actual ledgers. He thinks he holds a trump card that expired 2 decades ago.
That means they depend on other countries to buy from them. Well, you can't buy from them if you can't ship it there, and you can't buy from them if your economy is being destroyed by what Iran is doing.
No, little Marco. It's not what Iran is doing. It's what the US is doing. The Strait of Hormuz was completely open before the US decided to bomb Iran. The US started this war. Iran is defending itself. And now Washington is acting shocked that Iran is in control of the very strait they try to use as a weapon.
So it is in China's interest that Iran stop closing the straits. It's harming China as well. The gentleman in the red tie, right there. Yes, I'm sorry, what's your name?
Liz Landers with PBS News Hour.
Okay.
Another question about the China-Iran relationship. You said at the beginning of your comments at the top that every single financial situation will be targeted. Does that include Chinese banks? Would the president sanction?
We're going to enforce our sanctions. I don't have an announcement for you. That will have to come from Treasury. But we have sanctions in place, and sanctions don't mean anything unless you're going to do something about them. So I think that's been clear. I think that
Now, this part is even more insane. Rubio is threatening secondary sanctions on Chinese banks for ignoring U.S. law. The shameless arrogance of telling a sovereign nation who they can buy energy from is exactly why the US is losing its grip on the global financial system. Rubio says sanctions don't mean anything unless you do something. Okay, Marco. Okay. Do it. Sanction the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China. Sanction the Bank of China. See what happens. These are the largest banks on planet Earth, with trillions of dollars in assets integrated into every corner of the global economy. In fact, Chinese banks collectively hold approximately $690 billion in US Treasury securities. If the US actually sanctions major Chinese banks, they will dump those treasuries, rates will spike, and the US debt crisis will accelerate. They won't collapse China's economy. They will collapse the Western financial system. This is exactly why BRICS nations are de-dollarizing at breakneck speed. China's CIPS payment system now connects banks across nearly 190 countries and is processing trillions in cross-border payments. Every time a guy like Rubio goes on TV and threatens to weaponize the dollar against a sovereign nation, another country looks at CIPS as an alternative to SWIFT. Washington's threats aren't showing strength. They are advertising their own desperation and accelerating the very de-dollarization they claim to oppose.
Treasury will follow up with any specific announcements. Suffice it to say, we're serious about our sanctions. Then a cost needs to be imposed on Iran for what they are doing. Otherwise, if they get away with this, guys, if they get away with pulling this thing off without paying a price for it and backing down, you're going to see multiple places around the world where other countries are going to be tempted to do the same. This is unacceptable. Again, I want to reiterate the point. We keep arguing back and forth about the war and the shooting and this and that and the other. These guys are shut down an international waterway. The Straits of Hormuz do not belong to Iran. They don't have a right to shut it down and blow up ships and lay mines. And that's what they've done. That needs to be addressed. Otherwise, and it cannot be normalized. Under no circumstances can we live in a world where we accept, okay, this is normal. You have to coordinate with Iran. You have to pay them a toll in order to go through the Straits of Hormuz. Not only is that unacceptable in the Straits, you're creating a precedent that could be repeated in multiple other places around the world. The whole world should join us in this condemnation, and the whole world should join us in doing something about it, by the way. It shouldn't just be us. We're hoping to get countries. We're going to give them a chance to do something about it at the United Nations. All right, my last question.
This is funny. Rubio wants China to tell the Iranian foreign minister that Iran is globally isolated. And then what happens? The Iranian foreign minister flew to Beijing on May 6th for talks with Chinese foreign minister Wang Yi. During the meeting, Iran's FM said that China is a close friend of Iran and bilateral cooperation will even become stronger under current circumstances. So much for isolation, Little Marco. This isn't just a diplomatic visit. This is Iran and China publicly signaling that they are deepening their partnership right before Trump arrives in Beijing. The timing is deliberate. The message is crystal clear. Iran has a superpower backing it. Iran is not isolated. Iran is integrated into the most powerful economic bloc on the planet. Rubio is telling China to convince Iran it's isolated, while Iran is literally sitting in Beijing with the Chinese foreign minister negotiating closer cooperation. The delusion is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Here's what Rubio doesn't understand. In 2025, China bought roughly 90% of Iran's oil exports. Russia is expanding trade with Iran. The BRICS nations are integrating with Iran. Iran isn't globally isolated. They are Western isolated. And in 2026, being isolated by the West while being integrated with Asia means you're going to be thriving. Washington keeps confusing the international community with the US and its 5 closest friends. The arrogance is blinding them to reality. What we just watched from Bessent and Rubio isn't strategy. It's nostalgia. They are operating on a mental map of the world from 1995, where America dictates terms, China relies on American consumers, and the threat of a US sanction makes the world tremble. But it's 2026. China has 1.4 billion barrels of oil in reserve, an economy driven by domestic infrastructure, and a banking system too big to sanction. Washington isn't leading the world anymore. They're just shouting orders into an empty room, wondering why nobody's listening. If you got any value from this video, hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and tell me in the comments, do you think Washington will actually pull the trigger on Chinese banks? Or is Rubio just bluffing? As usual, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
They're creating a secondary economy in the world, totally independent of the United States. We won't have to talk about sanctions in 5 years because there'll be so many countries transacting in currencies other than the dollar that we won't have the ability to sanction them.